Hello everyone, welcome back to Astrox Radio. I'm your host, Astrox, and today we will be diving deep into a very interesting topic. We've reached a 21st century space race, with the top two contenders being USA and China. We're going to dive deep into that, and more on this week's episode of Astrox Radio. So the United States has already landed on the moon, but that barely makes it easier for them to beat China. Because that was all the way in the 1960s and early 70s, over 50 years ago. That's just insane, because that won't help them at all. 50 years old technology, that's half a century ago. If you try to use that technology, that'd be significantly outdated with what they're aiming for right now. So they have no advantage over China, other than maybe some past mission control experience or something like that. So you might be wondering, why is this space race so important to both countries? They're competing so that they have geopolitical influence, as the surrounding countries will think of them as powerful. They would have economic dominance, as they would have a lot of stuff from the moon that other countries don't have. They would have military superiority, where they would look insanely powerful to the world, even if, it makes it easier for them to set up a space-based military defense system, such as the United States Golden Dome idea. Both nations are seeking to control lunar resources and set the rules for technological innovation in the 21st century. So what does each country have at their use to achieve this major feat? So the United States is leveraging NASA's Space Launch System and SpaceX's Starship, possibly, for the Artemis moon missions, aiming for a 2028 crewed landing. China is developing the Long March 10 rocket to launch its Mengzhu spacecraft and Lanyu lander for a planned crewed landing by 2030, using a two-launch strategy. So look, China still believes they'll beat the United States, even though they have 2030 and the United States has 2028, because they believe the United States will have to keep delaying. A 2028 launch window won't be suitable for them. As for spending of their budget, the United States leads, with NASA's Artemis program estimated to cost over $100 billion between 2012 and 2028, or approximately $6 to $9 billion annually. China is more discreet, as they're putting an estimated annual space budget of around $12 to $16 billion, but this covers all space activities, not just lunar efforts. Let's go through each country's launch schedule. For the United States, it starts with Artemis 1. That was already completed in November 2022. It was an uncrewed flight test of the Space Launch System, rocket, and the Orion capsule, testing heat shields and systems in deep space. Then there's going to be Artemis 2, which is coming on very soon. It's targeted for April 1st, 2026. It will be the first crewed flight of SLS and Orion, orbiting the moon to test life support and crew capabilities. And then there will be Artemis 3, which is targeted mid-2027, which is planned to be the first human landing on the moon since 1972, using a commercial lander, which is false, because they've now changed the whole plan, as everything's been pushed up one launch. So Artemis 3 will be a low Earth orbit testing for Starship or Blue Origin's New Glenn. They're all happening in low Earth orbit, nothing to do with the moon. Then Artemis 4, which will be what I said in Artemis 3, the planned to be first human landing on the moon since 1972, utilizing a commercial lander. Then there'll be Artemis 5, which is targeted for late 2028, a second crewed lunar landing mission, and Artemis 6 will be having further lunar surface exploration, and probably in 2029. So once again, as everyone knows, China is very secretive with their launch plans, but here's some estimates. So there's going to be Chang'e 7, 2026 for robotic mission to explore the lunar south poles for resources. Chang'e 8, 2028, which will be a follow-up mission for further lunar research. Then there'll be straight up crewed lunar missions from 2029 to 2030, with the first crewed landing planned. The launch strategy is that two Long March 10 rockets launch the Mengzhu spacecraft and Lanyu lander separately, with the Mengzhu holding the crew, which will rendezvous and dock in lunar orbit. So far, the testing and development plans for China is that Long March 10 has completed a tethered ignition and static fire tests, with low altitude demos completed. The Mengzhu crew capsule has completed zero altitude abort tests and high-speed abort tests under maximum aerodynamic pressure. The Lanyu lander has conducted integrated landing and takeoff testing. There's also been a lot of supporting systems testing with the new spacesuits named Wang Yu and the lunar rover named Tansuo. And finally, there's been a lot of infrastructure being built for construction of specialized launch facilities at the Wenchang Space Launch Site for the Long March 10 is progressing. So now with all this foundational knowledge, who's currently ahead? That's the question that arises. Personally, this is very hard to answer, but as of early 2026, I guess the United States maintains a lead in overall space capabilities, particularly in commercial innovation and heavy lift capacity. But China is rapidly narrowing the gap and leading in specific lunar milestones. The competition focuses on lunar dominance, with the United States pushing for long-term sustainability via NASA's Artemis program, as I said, and China focusing on steady execution of its China-Russia International Lunar Research Station initiative. But China is really fast progress, and the lead is going very narrow from the United States and China. The United States are in lead obviously because of Artemis 1 already launching and Artemis 2 is in progress of launching very soon. Okay, now let's look at the specs of all the spacecraft that's going to be dealing with the moon in terms of the United States and China. We'll first start with SLS, Block 1. It will be 98 meters tall with 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. The core stage burns liquid oxygen and hydrogen. Then there's the Orion spacecraft. It carries 4 astronauts powered by a European service module. Finally, the planned Starship human landing system, which is 52 meters tall, 9 meters diameter, and SpaceX's vehicle would be designed to land a crew and over 100 tons of cargo on the lunar surface, which all planned. And quickly, before we move on to China, let's first see what the Saturn V did in the 1960s and early 70s. It was 111 meters tall compared to 98, 10 meters diameter, and produced 7.5 million pounds of thrust, which is lower than the 8.8 million pounds of thrust for SLS. Now let's see China's specs of the spacecraft. The Long March 10 rocket is a 3-stage launch vehicle specifically for the manned lunar mission, standing 92.5 meters tall with a 5-meter diameter, and is capable of launching at least 27 metric tons into the Earth-Moon transfer trajectory. The thrust is approximately 2,678 metric tons, and it has some reusable potential with the first stage boosters. The propellants are liquid oxygen and kerosene for first and second stages, and liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen for third stage. The Mengzhu manned spacecraft is a new generation spacecraft designed to replace the Shenzhou, capable of deep space travel. It has a capacity of 3 astronauts, a structure which comprises an escape tower, return capsule, and service module. The mass is approximately 26 metric tons. The Lanyu lunar lander, which is a lander module designed for lunar landing, consists of a landing stage and a propulsion stage. It will carry 2 taikonauts and a 200-kilogram rover to the surface. The future giant rocket currently in development is projected to be 114 meters tall with a 10-meter core diameter for larger lunar missions. That's interesting. They have similar kind of specs, but they have a completely different plan of dominating the moon. Okay, before we do some more, let me quick U-console rant. You know what a U-console is? If you don't, it's a really awesome portable computer by Clockwork Pi. No, it's not like the calculator style computer of the Pico Calc. That was very, very basic with barely any power. It had 264 kilobytes of RAM. Then it went to 512 kilobytes RAM with the Pico 2W. Then when I got a Lovebox slider, I had 128 megabytes RAM. But this U-console, I can upgrade it from as little as 1 gigabyte RAM, which is a minimum. So 1 gigabyte of RAM, CM4, or I can go all the way up to a CM5 with 16 gigabytes of RAM, with all the ones in between, with 4, 8, etc. So I'm getting the 4 gigabyte RAM CM4 inside of it, and it's really awesome. And I recently received a shipping email, so it should be arriving in a week from when this podcast is recorded. I will make sure to make a lot of YouTube shorts on it, and I'll talk more about it probably next episode. Now here's the section of Did You Catch the Cosmic Update? It's basically some trivia. It's have you been paying attention? It has 5 questions and 5 answers obviously, so we'll go through them. Why is this space race so important to both countries? Answer is a contest for geopolitical influence, economic dominance, and military superiority, with both nations seeking to control lunar resources and set the rules for technological innovation in the 21st century. Question 2. What is the main rocket each country will be using in the early stages of the program? Answer: SLS in the early stages for Artemis, and Long March 10 for China. Question 3. How much payload capacity does the Long March 10 and SLS rocket each have for the moon? The answer is that each have about 27 metric tons. Question 4. When is the first projected human landing according to Artemis as of March 2026? Answer: Artemis 4 in early 2028. Question 5. What's the estimated cost for the Long March 10 rocket for one launch to the moon? Answer: it's about 250 million USD. That's where we wrap up this episode of Astrox Radio. If you're still here, I thank you very much for supporting this growing podcast. And if you haven't already, follow me wherever you're listening and subscribe to me on YouTube. If you have any feedback for this episode, make sure to drop a comment on YouTube. And make sure to remember that all dates said in this episode are subject to change, so they can change at any time. So until next time, strive for space.